Welcome to Winning the Game of Life. Known as Jungleman at the poker table, Dan Cates has gone from being the bag boy at McDonald's with no friends and a dead-end future to winning over $11 million in online poker, over $7 million in live tournaments, and is a World Series of Poker champion. He has found fame, fortune, been to incredible places all over the globe, and connected with some amazing people. It looks like Dan has won the game of life, but that is not the way he sees it. Dan sees winning as doing his part to help everyone in the world win. He knows he can't do it alone, though. He knows it's going to take a collective effort with anyone that wants to see the same thing. Join us each week as Dan starts the conversation to do just that. On the show, Dan will interview incredible individuals that have made the impossible possible, those that have won the game of life, and those that want to help others win as well. Hit subscribe and follow Dan's journey on Instagram at @TheDanCates. Let's explore anyone and anything that can help make this world a better place, increasing the odds of us all winning the game of life. And now, here's your host, Dan Cates.
What's up, guys? This is Dan Cates here, and I've got one of the top 10 biggest women winners at poker, now a pretty key, solidly in the effective altruism movement. I don't know how big of a part you're playing, but definitely one of the biggest parts in the poker world, and also a science show presenter, I understand, and TV presenter. I didn't know you've had such an extensive history. Oh, and I also learned you were the lead guitarist for Dissonance, the band. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we were a shitty university band that I think we played 2 gigs, and then we just rehearsed a lot. And yeah, I can't play guitar anymore, unfortunately. But
it's still pretty fucking cool.
Yeah,
I feel
it was cool at the time.
I feel like all the there must be tons of poker nerds out there, like not like having like mini, how do I make this PG, mini like crushes or bigger crushes on you after hearing this. Even I'm like a little like, whoa, this is cool. Like it would be nice to hear, you know, when I talk to girls, like they're telling me all these niche sort of things, especially doing something in metal or whatever. But it's quite rare. Well, whatever. Add that to your list of impressive feats of sorts, or feat related things. Why don't you go ahead and start with how you got involved into poker and any other interesting facts that the audience that I may not be aware of?
Sure. Well, I imagine a lot of this audience will be familiar with my backstory, but just to say it briefly, I graduated uni after studying physics, astrophysics, planning on like continuing it down that route. Needed to make some money, obviously, like most people do when they graduate. So instead of getting a real job, or I wanted to take
I don't know what you're going to do with physics. Good luck.
Well, yeah, it's very hard to make money. I think, even the top physicists, your best bet is to, you're the greatest prize you can win probably is a Nobel Prize. And even then that's only $1 million. And you often split it between people, and not to, poo-poo the Nobel Prize, but like you work your entire life and like that's the maximum payout in terms of I mean, I guess you can get some kind of like corporate gigs and such, but yeah, it's I don't think people go into physics for the money, let's put it that way. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to take a gap year because I wasn't sure if like a career in research was quite right for me. And on that gap year, I started applying for TV game shows, and it was on one of these game shows that I learned to play poker. It sort of disguised itself as like a, some kind of like mystery quiz show. It was like, could you use your powers of skill and deception to win £100,000? And they wanted to get basically 5 complete beginners, teach them how to play, and then see who was the best. And I didn't end up winning it because a combination of things. I ran us straight into a flush. It was pretty.
Not a great strategy.
Not a great strategy, but on top of that, much worse. Very embarrassingly, I didn't notice that there were 4 diamonds on the board. And I like check raised the river, if I remember right, for basically my entire stack. And then I noticed there were 4 diamonds and I knew I had like 2 black cards. I can't remember what my hand was. I just had a straight and like gasped, like audibly gasped when I noticed. I was like, so like the worst poker face you've ever seen. And my opponent, who was, you know, also just as much a beginner as me, we've both been playing for a few weeks. You know, that's how bad my reaction was, that he realized that like I didn't notice the 4 diamonds. So then he set me all in and I had to fold because it was obvious he had. It was very bad. Anyway, so I didn't win that show, but I just completely fell in love with poker. Like I loved it so much. So started playing a bit more, you know, going down to like a local card club in London called the Gut Shop. And funny enough, played the first ever tournament I ever played. It's like a £5 rebuy or something. Absolute carnage, just like short stack nightmare. And I won it out of like 120 people. So then assumed I just must be insanely talented at this game, and enough to like put physics and everything else on hold, and to then like actually immerse myself in the industry. Which I think when I've spoken to a lot of players who are now like, who turned into professionals at some point, they all have a similar origin story, and that they won or had like a lot of success in one of the first few tournaments they ever played. So I think there's like some kind of selection effect going on where, I mean, obviously people who are more naturally talented at the game are more likely to turn professional, but I think that there's a big element of people who also got lucky early on because they just like got that insane dopamine reward that winning a tournament gives you. And also this like extra confidence boost, because I mean, when you're a beginner, you can't assess whether when you win is because you got lucky or because you got skillful. You just have no idea what skill really is in poker. And that definitely applied to me. Like I just came away thinking I was the best. I'm like, well, if I've only been playing for a few weeks and I win this, and these people play all the time, I must be amazing. And it just gave me this like false confidence, this like useful, as Kate Hall calls it, useful fiction, that just deluded me, but gave me so much confidence that I like carried that into every game I played, and it definitely sort of bolstered my results for a while.
Well, I will say a couple things. So it sounds like, yeah, if you have that and you don't let it go too far to your head, it can give you like a little, like a booster into getting into something. I had a different sort of false confidence of sorts, but I mean, it's affecting me now. I actually had the opposite thing happen. I got crushed, but because I was so successful at other things, well, it worked out for me in poker, but maybe not in other stuff after succeeding. I mean, finding out how tough the real world is a bit eye-opening, you could say. Let's put it that way. It's always funny to see how people's stories of what happened led them to, well, hopefully success. And I think there's something to learn from that. And yeah, the idea of how confidence, like, I just personally find the way that confidence, how can you say? I want to say manifests into success or vice versa. It was interesting just to find a path more successful and like do what they want to do. But this seems like a big subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a huge subject. I mean, poker would actually be, if there was a way to devise a study, poker would be a great area to study this like phenomenon in, because you have something that is a combination of skill and luck. You have a lot of different players. So if there's a way you could take a fresh cohort of new players who are considering, you know, they like the game, but they're very much recreational, they're very new to the game, and like track their results, track how they all do. Like, and I'm talking mostly about like tournament poker, just because it's obviously something that's much more streaky, and you know, you win a tournament, you're much more likely to come away deluded than if you just win a few nights in a row at a cash game. Right. And then if there was a way to like objectively measure their like bravado or delusion level, and I imagine there are like a list of questions you could ask them, and you know, put them on a sort of a rating scale of, you know, in terms of just so much self-belief. Like someone who's got like the most self-belief in the world in poker might be like Phil Hellmuth, for example. And
I think he
like
knows
he's clearly doing something right.
I think he knows. I think part of him knows that he's a bit. I think he's aware of what's going on. To be honest, from what I've seen.
In terms of, well, what do you mean?
I think he plays it up a lot and doesn't really. I think subconsciously he can see that, maybe he's not as good as he likes to believe. I mean, he's got something going on for sure. It just feels like he just doesn't go there, if you know what I mean, mentally. But so valuable to play up this persona for him that he just keeps doing.
No, I think he does by and large. Like if you like, I've talked to him about it, and he's like, no, it's like his mantra. He's like, I will be the greatest. I am the greatest. And you say that to yourself enough, you will start to believe it. And clearly, it's like, I mean, the guy's track record is unbelievable. Like he won another bracelet. He almost won like 2 or 3 bracelets this summer. Like, and yet he plays in such an unconventional style. I have a sort of theory that he's just like broken the poker god's simulation somehow, and he doesn't like quite realize it. And like, it's just like he bends the universe to his will, but in an unintended way. And it's, I mean, it's just, yeah, like he calls it white magic, right? Like he literally says like hashtag white magic. He's always tweeting it. And like, I don't know, there's something to this. Because, like obviously like the poker world gives him shit all the time saying like, yeah, but mate, you're not following the math and so on. You're not following the game theory, but doesn't like, I haven't watched enough of his play to know whether he's actually playing, how close or how far away from GTO he is. So I can't comment on that. But from what I hear, he's pretty far, right? So, isn't that interesting that it's like, it's still working?
I think it's interesting, but I think it's really funny. I
it's hilarious. No, I love it.
I kind of understand it. I think that he plays he just, there's a lot of people that like are over aggressive against him in all these ways that aren't very good. Let's put it that way. And this can be quite a big mistake in certain contexts.
Absolutely. And he does know how to capitalize upon that. Like I mean, I think he probably has better intuitions than most even top pros, like of like the GTO pros who also have good intuitions about poker, they'll have good gut feelings. I think overall, Phil is probably, his are even better honed. Because I mean, he's got more experience than most, like, leading, people like you, even he's been playing for longer, right? Yeah. That said, if it was you and him heads up, I know where my money's going, but
that's what you think. That's what
although I mean, well, actually now, I mean, you and Phil playing heads up, because talking of people who know how to like bend, break the simulation or bend the universe to their will. I mean, we can get into that topic later. I mean, having seen what I saw you do in, the Players Championship.
I have new magic powers as of recently. So
man, something weird is going on in that.
He was a more powerful wizard at first, but if you saw, like, I was dressed up as we were both dressed up as wizards. Maybe people thought it was a joke, but it was kind of real. Like, he used to be the most powerful poker wizard, but now that he's defeated me, I have ascended and become, even more powerful than you can imagine.
Yes. Would you maybe for the audience, maybe explain what happened?
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. We'll go over briefly because I want to focus on you, but I'm not even sure if you're aware, but on TV, I got Phil down to like a over 10-1 chip lead or something for heads up, and somehow I folded like 3 of a kind to his bizarre bluff, and of course the perfect river came for me to fold for some insane price, like 7-1. I just like forgot all that I had on him, and he did exactly what he thought he did, and just magic, and then somehow from there I lost the whole thing. And then of course, as of recently, I don't know if people if my audience hasn't seen my personal recent success. I declared recently that I was going to win 50K Poker Players Championship, and just kept playing it up as an act and said, yep, I'm going to win. I mean, it's all just fun and games. And they're just not ready for it, and they don't know who they're messing with. They're saying this nonsense, and then obviously I dyed my hair blue to go into God mode, which and then dressed like a cartoon character, kind of like Goku.
You were like an anime superhero.
Yeah, and then got
magical
some like
superhero.
Yeah, got like the candies that represented the magic from the Goku series, Dragon Ball Z series, and it got a power boost and all that. And then towards the end, everyone was talking shit and saying I was out of magic beans, and then somehow I won the thing with the blue hair. Yeah, that's a summary of Phil Hellmuth and my wizarding magic powers. Well, we're getting a little bit off topic, but yeah, it's a summary. But we should go into magic very soon. And by the way, with the another topic that would be interesting is this idea of confidence to be learned, because confidence can be learned. There is such a thing at any level, really. I mean, and this is really potentially one of the powers of poker, I think, because it teaches you really to be really tenacious and to like that you can do it. And this is what I think is something central to gaming. I'd like for you to comment on this if you think this is an idea that has validity or not. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But I personally learned to persevere and try really damn hard at things because of poker and having success at other games. But what are your thoughts on this version of education, of educating someone that yes, they can do something if they really apply themselves? Do you think gaming and well, I personally thought poker could be used in this way, potentially for certain people at least, but maybe I was mention of that gaming could be used this way, and there's a little bit more to that story.
So I understand the question. Do you think there's value in teaching people that if they put their mind to it, they can achieve stuff by using gaming as a way to show them that? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's a first summary. That's the first idea I want to present.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I would say yes, because games are like basically little, whether you're talking about a chess game, a game of poker, or like even like something like, a platform game, Sonic the Hedgehog. I remember playing. I was obsessed with. I had a Sega Mega Drive, in when I was 8 or whenever my parents finally got me one after begging. And I remember playing Sonic just over and over because I noticed that like, well, if I practice, I remember just being obsessed with doing speed runs on certain things, like how fast I could finish it. And I would just do it over and over in this obsessive way and just like shaving off like microseconds here and there. And it definitely taught me the power of like, no, practice is incredibly, if you practice, you will get better. And I mean, I know it sounds obvious, like everyone, thinks they know that, but to actually like really feel that and internalize it is a really important thing, especially for young people. And games are good because they will like, they're usually quite, if they're designed in a simple way, then those feedback loops are really tight. You will typically get rewarded through that, through that hard work and practice. So yeah, that's why, I mean, I think I like, where, if when Igor and I have kids, like I'm definitely going to encourage them to be playing games. I don't want them to always be playing on a computer game, maybe we can go outside, do other things. I'm certainly going to teach them poker because there's just so many different life skills and thinking skills and sort of educational skills that the like different games give you. Chess is obviously very much a sort of, I think, while chess is an amazing game, I would not, like if I was given the choice of you'd only ever teach your kid chess or only teach them poker, hands down, I'll teach them poker because chess is so much more limited in terms of application to the real world. It just makes you very good at like picturing and calculating sort of multiple moves ahead in this like very narrow space. Whereas poker, you get to do the same kind of like calculating moves ahead and sort of forward planning, but then you also have to learn like probabilities and you'd have to deal with so much more uncertainty. And then there's also like the human element. Like, I mean, sure, in chess, I guess there's a human element. You try and predict what your opponent's going to do to an extent, but like You don't have to look into someone's soul and try and decide whether they're like deceiving you, you know, or are they telling you the truth? You get to like, there's much more sort of scope for storytelling in poker as well. And then of course there's the luck versus skill thing. That's one of the toughest and most important lessons that poker teaches you. You know, if I sat down against Magnus Carlsen in chess, he's going to beat me 99.999% of the time. Maybe he has a heart attack or something, or like something crazy happens and he somehow loses, but he's always going to win. Whereas I sit down, you know, you sit down against a complete beginner, they're still going to, and you play for like an hour, you're only going to win like 60% of the time or something. And so it's like what we talked about. It's like figuring out whether your strategies are good. You know, you can only really look at your results, but results are noisy and they aren't always that meaningful over the short term. So that is a really important lesson for life, because life has that messiness too. You know, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you start up a company and it fails, and then you start up another company and it fails, it's like, well, did that fail because I'm a bad entrepreneur, or did it fail because you know, I just started it at the wrong time, or like some bad chain of events happen? You know, and being able to discern between that and figure out which of your strategies are good versus bad is like one of the biggest challenges in life, and that's really something that poker teaches.
With that, I totally agree. I personally, there's this one bridge between poker and life that I personally miss, but this, I feel like this taught me something about life as well. I mean, I used my own personal strategic thinking in poker in life. I want to talk about this subject a little bit from the point of impact, in terms of effective altruism impact. But let's put this to the side for the moment, because we've jumped ahead. Well, we've jumped to kind of a topic that's a little bit far away. You know what? Actually, let's start even from your poker career. What do you feel like which accomplishments in your poker career matter the most to you, and why?
Which accomplishments matter the most to me? Well, I mean, the obvious answer is like, you know, when I won the EPT San Remo back in 2010, that was important for obviously a number of practical reasons, in that it like made me well known, it gave me a bankroll, and you know, I got my PokerStars sponsorship off the back of it, and so on. So I mean, that was definitely like the biggest juncture in my life. Although that's another sort of interesting life lesson, because you know, when I won that thing, again, it was like pretty early on into, you know, I'd only been playing full time for about a year and a half. And it was, I think, the biggest tournament ever held in Europe at the time. And then the amount of sort of fanfare and attention that came along with it. Again, it sort of made me a little bit deluded about my skill level, in that it was just, I was like, well, clearly I must be just very, very talented at this. And, you know, looking back on it, I definitely played very unconventionally. Like, I would not play the same way now. I think, you know, I was far, far away from GTO most of the time. I didn't really know what I was doing in retrospect. And I was playing actually just very intuitively. I would have a feeling and I would go with it. And it worked out on this occasion. And so it kind of made me, I remember I just didn't really study the game much for like the year and a half following, which definitely cost me, like, both, you know, monetarily, but also just like in my confidence, because then I was like, I won that, and then I didn't catch, I think, a single tournament basically for another year and a half, you know, maybe had one or two. And that was sort of a lesson of like, wait, I'm getting, you know, there's you know, that famous book, Fooled by Randomness. That, I think that happened to me a little bit. It went to my head and so on, and made me a bit complacent. So that was an interesting lesson that came from it. I'm not sure how much it meant to me, like, because after a while, once I started realizing how much variance there is in tournaments, and you know, at some point I was like, wait, like, these aren't really as meaningful as I thought they were, unless you're willing to like grind it out so much and you know, like if you just play live tournaments, you don't get a big enough sample size in a lifetime really to really draw meaningful conclusions about what your true ROI is as a poker player. Because like, what can you can't play more than like 1,000 tourneys live. And considering that's what I mostly did, I can't say I can look back at my poker career and be meaning, you know, go, oh, that's it. That's definitely what my ROI was. I guess a lesson I can take from that is that I think I wasn't necessarily playing. And I think this was one of like, perhaps the thing that held me back in my career is that I wasn't so much playing for like being the very best player I could. I was almost just playing for like results and having, you know, having more numbers on my Hendon Mob. Like certainly in my like darkest times during my poker career, you know, where I was just like not really studying that hard, not even enjoying it that much. It's like I was optimizing for the wrong thing. I was optimizing for tournament scores that would make me feel justified to continue being a PokerStars pro, as opposed to actually playing for the love of the game. And that was an important lesson to like realize like, wait, what am I doing here then? Like that's not why this is silly. Like I should go and do something else. If I'm not actually playing for the love of the game anymore, I'm like, you know, it's like what was it, Goodhart's law, which is like any, you know, basically like I instead of focusing on the goal, I started focusing on the measure by which I can determine whether I'm achieving that goal. And if you focus too much on the measure, then the measure itself becomes the goal. And now you're no longer doing the thing you intended to do. So basically the measurement becomes decoupled from the goal itself, and you end up optimizing for the wrong thing. So yeah, I felt like that started happening to me a bit, particularly in the like latter part of my, you know, poker career. And in the end, I feel like I ended up playing longer than I wanted to. You know, I started playing less, but it was, you know, I had kind of a cushy situation with my PokerStars deal and so on. That was like a pretty nice, easy income where I didn't need to be doing that much else. And I didn't even really need to be studying the game that much. So I guess if like, I don't want to say it's a regret, but I think if I could do it all again, I would have quit poker a couple of years earlier.
Is this how you ended up doing something in Effective Altruism and starting Reg, or being a co-founder to Reg? You're a co-founder, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the co-founders. It was me, Igor, Phil Gruesome, Stefan Huber, and Rene Garcia in the beginning.
I should clarify. Reg is rational effective altruism. That's what the abbreviation of that is. Reg.
No, it stands for Raising for Effective Giving. But yeah, no. So we started Reg in 2014 after basically Igor, Phil, and Stefan met with some effective altruists in Switzerland who were like philosophers basically, who worked on figuring out, you know, like seeing that there are so many problems in the world, and you know, if you want to like help fix the world, make the world a better place, it's a really tough decision to figure out where specifically to give to, you know, whether you're donating time or money. You know, it's a very hard answer, a very hard thing to decide, but it's a very important question to ask, because some problems are just more important than others. You know, like a local cat shelter going out of business is sad, because it's like, well, what's going to happen to these cats? Like that is a problem, but it's much less of a problem than, say, you know, Indonesia and the tropical rainforest being decimated, for example. Yeah. And you know, and so like there's you have to sort of triage problems based upon like not only their size in terms of the number of people that are affected, but also like the ability to solve them, and also like their comparative neglectedness. So there's like these sort of different like frameworks of how you can like look at you know, how you can effectively triage the different problems.
Can I add another factor? Another factor? Well, also how helping them affects helping yourself in a way that can help more, if that makes sense, because there's plenty of like you can help like solve, you can help give funding to preventing, you know, mass or really bad diseases, for example, but no one gives a shit about that, and this won't do anything for you to like raise more money. So like, even though this is quite an important one that I understand is neglected, I recall you telling me, it doesn't make much sense to focus on that. Oh, well, it does.
Why? Because it doesn't. Because it doesn't inspire more people to also give to it, or why?
It does make sense to focus on it, but relatively less than potentially other bigger causes, such as preventing death and things like that.
Sure. Well, it's also a question of like, how do you, like how much do you zoom in or zoom out on a particular thing? Like, I remember a really good analogy is like someone saying, well, look, I'm going to donate all my money to a breast cancer charity because my mum died of breast cancer, and I don't want anyone else to have their mother die of breast cancer. And it's like, yeah, no, that's the noble cause. But even bigger than that, how about you ask the question, what is the thing that ends up killing the most mothers? Because ultimately, you don't want anyone to lose their mother prematurely, whether it's to breast cancer or to bowel cancer or to road accidents or anything. Like, so maybe, maybe that's the more important question. What is the thing that ends up killing the most mothers, and how can I help stop that? So it's about sort of like zooming out and really just like, taking as much of a big picture view as you can before like delving in. And the thing is, because like often like, we're all ultimately affected by our own life events, and understandably, if someone's like grown up with, lost someone they love to a road accident, they might be more focused on doing stuff to improve road safety and so on, which it's good. Like these problems do need solving, but if it comes at the cost, if too many people are focusing on a particular thing because it happens to be in the news right now, or it's just a very salient example of suffering, it sometimes can cannibalize too much of, or absorb too much attention and money, because unfortunately, when it comes to philanthropic giving, it is kind of a zero-sum game. There aren't unlimited funds. And so when you do give to one place, it invariably means you're not giving to somewhere else. And if it turns out that somewhere else was actually going to save 10 times as many people, or, improve a situation 10 times better, well, that's a big loss effectively. So it's about like, not only asking these big questions, but then also like making sure that the data you gather to answer that question is done in as rigorous way. So a lot of like effective altruism is about sort of applying the scientific method to like interventions on problems, like using randomized control trials and such to actually see which things work the best.
That makes a lot of sense. I have another thought for you related to that. So how exactly does this relate to poker? Like, how it seems like a little bit of a tangent to go from, I'm playing a game, or you're playing a game where you're trying to win someone else's money through strategy and, a mix of deception and, and value and getting the most for your money and reading your opponents or whatever. How do you go make a jump from this to effective altruism? Is there something in common there, or just?
There's a lot in common, because basically it's applying effective altruism, or this like approach, taking a scientific approach to philanthropy is kind of, it's using a poker mindset to solve, to answer a difficult question and to solve the world's problems. And by that, I mean, like, it's thinking about uncertainty. Like, there's a lot of expected value thinking in effective altruism, for example, because like some issues are that, like, actually, you could, for certain problems, like, let's say AI safety, or protecting against the next pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty there. We don't know for certain, like, that there's going to be another big pandemic in 10 years time. Certainly a few years ago, we didn't think there was going to be some huge catastrophic pandemic that will affect the world. At least we only gave it a probability, but you want to multiply that probability by the potential impact to understand what the expected cost is of such an event if it happens. And therefore you can choose to invest your money into things that will help prevent that, will help mitigate it. So there's a lot of uncertainty when you're thinking about the future, then you need to use sort of the prediction skills that you would use in poker, such as expected value thinking, in how you approach it. And then in terms of like how I transitioned into doing that, I mean, it just kind of happened organically, because once we learned about this concept of effective altruism, it was like, okay, because I had historically, whenever I'd done anything remote, like philanthropic. It was just like I would see some upsetting thing on TV and donate some money to it because I felt so bad. I was like, oh, this is horrible. Like, look, people are, this war-torn country is having this. Okay, fine.
Funny, the marketing got you too.
Yeah, of course. And I mean,
impact got you.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't think we should divorce our emotions from like any charity that we do. Like, I think emotions are a very important thing. Like, and it's, because they will motivate us to do something. And then also if we end up then doing something and we feel like we've helped, we feel good, and that will make us more likely to help again in the future. So I think emotions are an important part of that, but it's that we have to also remember that emotions aren't necessarily perfectly calibrated to what's the most important issue. They're best calibrated to what's the most like visualizable issue. Like there's the identifiable victim, for example. That's why they'll often put a picture of this is Sam. Sam has been living in these terrible conditions. Help Sam. Don't let Sam suffer. And it's like, maybe there's only like 150 Sams in reality. And meanwhile, there's like 10,000 other anonymous kids that you don't hear about every day, because it's just like global poverty, for example. Like roughly around 20,000 kids die of just like very easily preventable causes, like reasons, in terms of like malnutrition, or just like they needed to be dewormed pretty cheaply. But it's just, there's still so much extreme poverty, and it's happening so often that we just don't even notice it. And meanwhile, there'll be like some kind of, new disaster will happen, be an earthquake somewhere. And it's very bad. Like, let's say, 10,000 people are suffering and dying because it's like a new novel event. We'll hear about it in the news, and there'll be images of it like right now and so on. And so people that will get a ton of money and funding, even though it actually will help a fraction of the people that like could be helped with that same money right now, with like malaria prevention or something. So it's like, what, how, I hate to use the word, but like how sexy a problem is, and like in terms of how like visceral and visual it is, that doesn't match up necessarily with like how effective it is. So yeah, but anyway, to answer your question, we started it because we still wanted, this was back in 2014, we still wanted to continue playing poker. But, ultimately, let's put it this way. If the whole world started playing poker professionally, the world would end pretty fast, because it's just a game. Really, it's, while there's like some entertainment that happens, which I think adds some value, it still ultimately is a sort of zero-sum game overall, in terms of like it's pushing money around a table to different people, and some people come away feeling bad and some people come away feeling good. I still think overall poker is on net a benefit to the world, because I think if people learn the lessons from it that it teaches, and then take them away and like think better about their other decisions in their everyday lives. But we couldn't sustain a world full of professional poker players, let's put it that way. So yeah, I think we saw Reg as a way of like turning poker from a game of like unclear whether it's a positive, negative, or zero-sum game into definitively a positive sum game, and that there are externalities to it that objectively make the world better, by encouraging poker players to donate a fraction of their winnings to really good places, really good causes. So that's really all Reg was about.
I'm totally on board with that. And by the way, I want to talk about another kind of impact. That one thing that really inspired me was the power of inspiration itself, through being able to influence emotions, as you said, through news and through story, etc. Like, this is really what has like the power over people, to get them to do things like change their actions. And one thing that poker players, one thing that's unique about poker, and that poker players, successful poker players anyway, have, is that they have the ability to shape their emotions to be aligned with logic, if that makes sense. I think this is a really understated and important characteristic of people in poker. And if we throw in a little bit, throw in the element of goodwill, we can firstly see, okay, if I'm just playing poker with my life, that's not really that great thing by itself, because it's not really doing anything beneficial for the world. And then, we've got this like neutral a mass of money that's going on and with these people, and it's like, oh, let's do something good with it. That's the easy alignment of, again, like further alignment from poker to something beyond poker. Let's put it that way. You know, I always found it interesting that it seems like there's a number of people in poker that are interested in rational, well, effective altruism, essentially, or using reason to give in a good way. I think,
yeah, like Dan Smith, for example, like,
yeah,
I mean, like Double Up Drive emerged a few years after Reg. It's through very much the similar principles. And, you know, like I think Dan was inspired by basically the same effective altruists that we were. And like, it's, you know, it's certainly taken the mantle over from Reg and is like now doing so much more than Reg even ever did. And like to see that like so many poker players just get it, like get the concept. That's, yeah, I think that's what has made poker. And I think it's certainly the thing that I'm like proudest of the poker community of, is like their ability, as you said, to like calibrate their emotions to, you know, not only logic, but also to like probabilities. I remember talking about it with Igor. You know, he's like, when I would play and I would see it's a coin flip, my gut would be feeling like I would be truly, my anxiety about that coin flip would be proportionate to my likelihood of winning, you know, so like 50%, and it's like, oh, I'm pretty stressed. Whereas you know, if I'm a 90% to win, like I will not be stressed at all. Whereas I think a lot of people in a high stakes, you know, who are amateurs will be still they'll be still sweating it so hard, you know, and they get it in with aces against, yeah, sevens, they'll be sweating it roughly as much as they'll be sweating it when they have a coin flip. Whereas I think a poker player, they will truly be sweating it proportional to their chances of losing.
On the whole, the idea of inspiration through story and through media, I mean, I'd like to hope that my podcast will be an example of this. Like, it's about winning the game of life. It's an example for many things, for also to show, okay, so a couple ideas to unpack here. Firstly, one thing that poker teaches you is a bit about the big picture, because you have to consider the big picture when you're thinking about your strategy and all of that. And contemplating the big picture, it may be possible to present some, you could say, sexy ideas or some things that can emotionally impact on a grand scale, if with the right tools, if that makes sense, and create an impact that, this is just what I've been thinking, and create an impact that goes beyond just like pure funding, because then it could help direct funding, if that makes sense.
Right. So some form of like, like just really good inspiration.
Yeah.
Like that. I've been sort of flirting with this idea for a while. I want to like create a meme factory where you get like just brilliant writers and artists and so on to help, because ultimately, like right now we're in a war of the memes, you know. And you could say like, you know, in some way, like communism is a meme, capitalism is a meme. Like, they're all ideas of like how the world should function and what's the best way, what's the thing that will make people happiest or the most flourishing, and so on. And we're in a war, like a narrative warfare situation. We call it the culture wars, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, there's competition going on because there's only finite attention and headspace out there, and like, you know, media companies are in like, I think part of the reason why we're seeing the world becoming so feels like everything's so aggressive and like stressed right now, you know, aside of the pandemic, is that the competition, that the media space has become so competitive now because there's so many like citizen journalists and like little media companies popping up here, there, and everywhere. You know, before it used to be like the New York Times and the Washington Post. You know, they're like maybe 10 or 20 major newspapers, and they only had to compete against each other for people's attention and like advertising dollars. But now, like, anyone could, like, technically, you know, the costs of setting up a news site are very, very small. Doesn't mean it'll be successful, but the point is that anyone can kind of try and do that now. And people are, even with like, you know, social media, like someone's Twitter account, people follow them, certain people for news, and the New York Times and etc. They're having to compete against that for attention. And that means that they're, you know, even if they might be trying their hardest to still stick to like good quality journalism, unfortunately, like that doesn't, the classic, if it bleeds, it leads. There's such a strong incentive pressure for media outlets to run with the most like emotionally insightful, upsetting headlines and so on, in order to get eyeballs, that it comes at the cost of good quality journalism. And you know, it pays for media, for newspapers to make people upset and angry, or happy technically, but usually the most powerful emotions are either anger, disgust, or fear and sadness. So they ultimately end up optimizing for those kind of stories. And it sort of starts snowballing. It makes people very stressed, which makes and unhappy, which makes it more likely for bad things to happen. And you know, I don't want to like pin and blame everything on the media industrial complex, but they're playing a huge role in this like this worrying trend of like, you know, people being depressed and like identifying with being depressed. It's like it's very en vogue to be pessimistic about the future, and I think that's a huge problem. And actually, one of the things I now want to be focusing on is like creating almost, again, like even if it doesn't seem perfectly accurate to be like fully optimistic about the future, I think it's like a useful narrative in order to like get people into a more positive headspace. Because if you have a positive, optimistic population, they're going to be much more productive than a pessimistic population.
For sure.
So yeah, I think inspiration is one of the most valuable tools we have, inspiring people to feel, you know, empowered to get up and go do something that is strictly positive sum and constructive for the world. And I think it's something that we should be, you know, basically we want to market optimism to the world, because people will be happier and more likely to then actually go out and do stuff and make, you know, it's like self-fulfilling prophecies. If you sit and, you know, if you like, who are you going to bet on? If you've got two identically skilled players that are going to go and sit in a really tough cash game for a week, and you can back player A or player B, even though they both equally skilled, like somehow we can know that they were both perfectly equally skilled, but player A is coming off the back of a like really good load of results. They're feeling great about themselves. They've been having a lot of people saying, you like, believe in yourself, you're playing great. And then player B has had the opposite. Everyone's been telling them they're shit. They've had like, you know, a bad run recently. They're just feeling very down on themselves. Which player are you going to put your money in? I mean, I think player A is like an obvious choice, right? And I think you can extend that out on a population level about like, do you have a country that's optimistic about the future and believing in themselves to like make a happy world, versus a country that's like full of shame and self-loathing and down on itself and like infighting? Obviously, you want the country, you know, country A is more likely to succeed and like make a happy, flourishing world. So how do we spread that meme of optimism is, I think, one of the most important questions of our time.
That I totally agree with. And I had a related thought on an individual level, at least for me. Like everyone always says, believe that the future will be good, or, you know, just have faith, you know, these kinds of ideas. And, you know, thinking about it rationally, thinking about faith rationally, it's rational to have faith if you think about it. Even though, and then I personally concluded that it's actually better to believe, you could say, believe in yourself or whatever, believe in the future, than be logical. Because if you're logical, you can think all sorts of things. But if you do believe in the future, it basically leads to better results. And yeah, it's just basically, if you believe that something is possible, believe that something is possible is like the first step to making it reality. So there's that, and it leads to more positivity and all these other beneficial kinds of emotions.
Yeah, I think it's. No, I personally agree. I think it might be valuable for the listeners to like actually define what you mean by faith. I can certainly give my definition of faith, because I think it's a very loaded word. People usually associate it with like, you know, faith in Jesus or faith in, you know, whichever God you believe in. And it certainly can mean that. And I don't think there's anything, you know, I'm still agnostic on the whole God topic, but I'm more open-minded to it than I was 5 years ago. Let's put it that way. And to me, what faith means is basically it's an anchor point wherein even if everything's going to shit and everything that you thought was true about the world turns out to be false, if you have faith in something, whatever that one thing is, it acts as an anchor to something that you feel is certain and unwavering. And again, like, and people are like, yeah, but what if there is literally nothing you can be certain on? Nothing. Like having something that you're willing to just attach to and be like, whatever happens, I'm just going to believe in this, and so on, has provenly given people unbelievable strength in like incredibly dark times. I actually remember like sort of getting into it with Jason Mercier on Twitter once, when it was like, I remember being annoyed at like the whole sort of thoughts and prayers things that I felt that like politicians were saying about the hurricane hitting Florida, and like, you know, like they just have faith in God and it'll be okay. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, you know, why, you know, telling people like that they should just, you know, have faith and then they don't have to do anything and so on. And he was like, don't knock on faith. There's value to it. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but like having now seen, it's like, no, basically he's referring to those people who are truly feeling in a hopeless situation and there really isn't much they can do. Having some faith is what will keep them sane and maybe give them the strength, like some kind of reserve that they can tap into to actually then get them through that impossibly hard situation. So yeah, I don't think it's not. Again, it's coming down to this thing of like useful, or maybe it's a false narrative, but it's a useful narrative. And there's value in that. So yeah, is that roughly what you would describe faith as yourself?
I think we're along the same paths. There's multiple definitions you could say. So in fact, even in Buddhism, Buddhists they don't, at least in the Buddhism that I read about, there's multiple sects of Buddhism, it's appropriate to have faith aligned with logic. This is my understanding, and this makes sense to me, but not blind faith. And even if you read, like, even if you're referring to something like the Bible, I don't think it exactly suggests blind faith, but there's like it's more like have optimism, if you could say. Like I would say I would say faith and hope are very intricately, yes. Because hope kind of implies that you know there's something better related. And
well, hope is optimistic faith, basically.
I would say that it may be the case. Well, just looking at it from the possibilities, you could say you don't know what's going to happen, but it may be the case that faith is is a false narrative, as you said. But in the case that it's not, it's best to have faith. But anyway, I know you made like a little video, but about like what is rationally the best course of action for everyone, at least in the subject of beauty. I remember, and you showed me
the Beauty Wars video.
It's a little bit of a tangent, but it's like, I guess I could see how it could. I could see potentially some relevance to the idea of giving money at some point, but
I don't think it's related to that specifically.
I could see how could be related, but it's not. The Beauty Wars isn't. I don't see how raising money is going to like help fix the Beauty Wars.
No. What the purpose of so the Beauty Wars video I made, I almost called it the alternative title to it was The Game Theory of Beauty, because I have, you know, I'm a woman, and I'm a woman who's now in her mid-late 30s. And I've noticed, like, when I was on Instagram, like spending time on it, the algorithm was starting to show me more and more like female related things, but like heavily made up women, or heavily filtered women, and then like cosmetic surgery suggestions and this kind of thing. And I'm like, this is not making me feel good about myself. This is interesting. And then like I would like try out the filters that it suggests, and like where like would just like I could have a completely plain, unmade up face, and with like a click of a button, it would turn me into like a Hollywood superstar, like the hottest version of myself I've ever seen. Just like that. And I'm like, what? But then you turn it off again and it's like, oh my God, that's what I really look like. And it's such a like power, like unbelievably huge delta between what this thing can do, what my real face is, and what this thing can make it look like. And it's so immediate, and there's such a strong like dopamine reward that you get from that it like becomes very addictive very easily. And I was thinking, wow, if this is what it's like, I'm pretty well adjusted in terms of like my relationship with myself and how I look and so on. And I've like, I think I've done all right on the looks department. And I was like, so if this is making me feel shitty, what is this doing for like a 15-year-old who 15-year-olds are notoriously like, insecure. Everything is about how they look kind of, because that's just like they're trying to get laid and such. And it's like, it just must be like, if I was 15 going through that, I think it would make me insane and like very, very miserable and hate myself. And then like I looked into it a bit more, and it's like, yeah, that seems to be the case. Like there's just like every study that's coming out on like the effects of particularly like beauty filters and like a lot of time for particularly young women spent on social media, like they are not having a good time. I mean, it's hard to obviously control for all the variables. I mean, there are many other reasons why like teenagers might be depressed as well, but this certainly isn't helping. And it got me thinking about like the nature of, how beauty works, because like really beauty kind of evolved as a way to signal to potential mates that we are, that we are more attractive than our competitors. Typically in nature, males are competing for females, right? They want to get laid, and that's why you'd see like a male peacock has sort of evolved this ridiculous plume of feathers, which are very, very beautiful. Like they're very nice to look at, and clearly female peacocks like have optimized. They like this, and they've selected the males. They're more likely to breed with the males that have this kind of stuff, and so this thing has evolved over time. But it's also interesting that the male peacock isn't actually very well adapted to survival in where it lives, because it's very conspicuous, like it's very easy to spot by predators. All those heavy feathers make it very hard for the peacock to fly. So it's an example of where what is found sexually beautiful decouples from what's actually good for the individual in terms of its health and survival chances. Whereas historically it seemed like beauty, we always thought that beauty is a sign of like your evolutionary fitness. You're more likely to survive in the environment you're in, and therefore, people want to mate with you and have children. But that's not always the case. And I was like, it seems like that might be what's happening here with these like beauty filters on Instagram, because, it seems like they're making people really, really miserable, and yet people can't seem to stop doing them. So why is that? And so then it got me, so then I was like thinking about the game theory of it. And basically what it is, it's an arms race. A kind of like, if you want to become a famous influencer, let's say you're a girl and all your peers in school or university, they're also like, they notice, because I mean, I've noticed this myself. If I post a sexy picture on Instagram, it gets so many more likes than if I post like me just, sitting on a couch, or like, heaven forbid, me talking about something like scientific or interesting. It just ultimately people are going to click on the thing that is like more visually appealing. So there's this like strong incentive to always do that and to use more and more of these filters to like get eyeballs. And particularly like so many people now want to be influencers as their job. Like it's like the number one desired job by Gen Z is to be like a YouTube star or an Instagram influencer. It's insane. So there's this really strong competitive pressures to do whatever you can to get as many people to like and follow your pictures, which means you're more likely to use these filters because they just make you look better, apparently. So it's like this kind of race to the bottom. And then I sort of combined this idea with this amazing like blog post that was written by Scott Alexander, who's like a famous rationalist blogger, called Meditations on Moloch, which is basically talking about these like unhealthy game theoretic dynamics, which make the world worse. So like a sort of race, like a race to the bottom scenario, like you know, why we're in a, you know, why we're all in like a Nash equilibrium nuclear standoff right now. We've been living under this since the Cold War. You know, in an ideal world, I think everyone would, if we could all simultaneously press a button to make nuclear weapons just disappear from the face of the earth together, we, you know, like forever, any rational actor would press it. But no individual country can do that, because then it leaves them vulnerable. So it's like this coordination problem. And you know, these, once you sort of understand this, you see these coordination problems everywhere. And beauty is just, you know, the Instagram filter beauty nightmare is just another example of coordination problems. Like, probably if you polled all these girls on Instagram and be like, hey, these filters are making you miserable, right? Yeah. Well, how about we all collectively stop using them right now? Probably like enough of them would opt in to be like, yeah, let's ban them, so that we could just go back to using our real faces, and at least then we're not like feeling so bad about ourselves. But because you can't, because there's so many people and there's so many there's so much incentive for each one person to defect, you know, kind of like a prisoner's dilemma, that you can't ever make it happen. So that's kind of what the video is about. It's kind of a long-winded way of explaining it. And then on top of that, there's this, what Scott Alexander, this blogger, did was he called it something, this like god of communication, of coordination failure and arms races. He called it Moloch. Now, obviously, it's not like there's a real, you know, metaphysical entity that wants to get the world trapped in coordination failure and like unhealthy game theoretic dynamics. It's like this like dumb unconscious process, basically. But it is very much a real phenomenon. And so I wanted to bring this character of Moloch to life, because I think it's a better way of, like, if you want to get a lot of people to understand this thing, you need to make it very, like, again, visually salient. And like kind of give it if you give it a character, then it's like kind of like a bad guy. And people, you know, we love stories. We like stories where there's the good guys and the bad guys. And the good guys is very obvious, you know, like that's why Disney's so successful. The good guys are obvious, the bad guys are obvious. And in this case, when it's such a complex topic, anything that you can do to like simplify it and make it memorable is important. So that's kind of what the video is about. It's a very long-winded way of saying it. It's much easier if people just go watch it. I think it'll be much clearer. But yeah, it's a really, really important concept. And again, I think it's one that poker players will get, because we understand game theory. And we understand, like, you know, it's one of the funnest things I have, like when like talking to poker players, I can just say, oh yeah, well, that's zero sum. And they'll immediately know what I mean. But most people don't know what zero sum means. They don't know what positive sum means, negative sum. And that's a big problem. You know, like, I think a lot of the like political narrative right now, like, you know, there's so much like anti-capitalist sentiment. And like, what is capitalism at its core? It's like a societal system that uses competitive dynamics to more accurately allocate resources to the things that we want. Now, obviously, there are very clear situations where capitalism breaks down, you know, like tragedy of the commons type situations where like it's free to pollute the atmosphere right now. So people will just do it, and because it means they can like run their business cheaper. You need to find a way of like taxing or like punishing these like negative externalities in a more efficient way, which is where like the failures of capitalism are. But at the same time, we wouldn't have an iPhone if it wasn't for capitalism. We wouldn't have, we wouldn't be having like these incredible technologies and like lifestyle improvements happening. Extremely unlikely to have had them the speed we've had them, were it not for allowing, you know, these competitive dynamics to make the best, the best companies win, and make products that are valuable. And I think that the part of the trouble is that when people see like, you know, they're like, oh, well, billionaires shouldn't exist. You know, like it means that they've taken $1 billion from other people. Like, no, most billionaires exist because they've built something that 1 billion people want, or like many, many people want, that has added value to the world. They've grown the pie. And I think that's the thing. People don't realize that capitalism, or like doing stuff, you know, business itself is by and large a positive sum game. It's not always. So I think it's important if someone's wanting to get into business, trying to figure out, well, is the industry I'm in net positive for the world or net negative? And, you know, so like, is it a positive sum game or a negative sum game? And I like, people just don't seem to understand this concept at all, whereas poker players do.
There's a lot of ideas all at once.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm on board with a lot of those ideas. I firstly want to state I totally agree that capitalism is almost certainly a good thing. I can't see how it couldn't be. This adds a whole nother dimension to the whole, effective altruism movement, you could say, in that I would presume that solving these race to the bottom dynamics, such as the beauty wars, would go a long way in having a big impact for the world, but maybe they're not worth the actual resources. I am a little bit curious how you went from where do we put where's the most effective use of the money to oh shit, what about this dynamic here that's crushing our happiness? Like, how do we, how do we do about that? What do I even do about that? Well, I guess from your perspective, it seems like it's not necessarily a big deal for you. You seem quite confident in that. You're showing you don't have to use those damn filters on the internet. And by the way, I want to state a theory that I have just from my own personal experience as a guy. I find that the ones that I'm most attracted to are still basically the same, if that makes sense, with or without makeup. And then it doesn't make that much of a difference in the attraction. My personal theory, and this is just really like just some guess out of my own experience, is that like actually it's not really doing a whole lot of good for anyone.
I think makeup on net, I don't have a particularly strong opinion either way. Like there's certainly a lot of value in makeup because it, like, women do, and it depends. Some women love it, some women hate it, but there's sometimes I'm in a mood where I feel like actually just putting on a bunch of makeup and I feel good. Like it's like I enjoy the process, I enjoy the artistry. Makeup can be an incredible form of art, like absolutely beautiful.
Good point, yeah.
And I think that there's an inherent value in that would be sad to be lost. I certainly don't want makeup to be banned in the world. I think that would be terrible. Like it's far more important to have choice. You must
be right, huh?
Yeah, it's far more important that there is choice in the world. For if women want to, or men, anyone wants to draw shit on their face that they think is beautiful, they should be absolutely free to do that. So again, it's like how do we succinctly define, a point, if any, where makeup, let's say, becomes unhealthy? And like, to me, an example would be if like I felt that I couldn't do anything, I couldn't leave my house or leave my bedroom in the morning until I had spent at least, let's say, 20 minutes putting on my face. Like for me, that would be a sign like I'm not, there's like to me that's unhealthy, because I would rather, 20 minutes a day adds up a lot. Like if you do 15 minutes a day on something over 100 years, that adds up to about a year of your life, roughly. That's a problem. To me, like I don't want to spend, so you have to ask yourself, is this something I want to spend a year of my life doing? If the answer is yes, then fine, carry on. But I personally would not want to spend a full year of my life just putting makeup on to like satisfy some societal aesthetic. So to me, like it becomes, there's like a sort of unhealthy point beyond which, where makeup is bad, where if someone is just, they feel like they have to spend so much time doing it. That varies from individual to individual. Again, if someone really enjoys doing it, then great, they should. But if someone's doing it because they feel they have to, in order to just be accepted, well, that's not good. So I think just having, and to be fair, I think the world has moved into this place more of like just generally like radical acceptance. If like someone wants to come to work, like our receptionists, back in the 50s, receptionists were expected to be, they were always female and they were expected to be dolled up and look a certain way. And if they didn't, they would lose their job. That seems bad. Nowadays, like there's less focus on like how you look for your work than there used to be, particularly for women. And I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I think makeup by and large is fine. And like, again, these beauty filters could be okay if it's done. I think where it becomes so insidious with them is where like it's done in a deceptive way, where people post an Instagram picture, it's filtered to the eyeballs, but they'd like, no one knows. So then other women will look at it and be like, men will look at it and be like, this is what all women should like clearly look like. And in real life, they don't look like this. Well, oh, she must be ugly. When in reality, they've just become deluded of what people really look like. And similarly, other women will see it and be like, well, damn, I don't look anything like her. And they'll look in the mirror and feel bad about themselves. And because they think that what they're seeing is real. So it's like, if like, you know, whenever you post a picture that's really filtered, it says underneath, by the way, this is a filtered picture, then at least it gives people like, oh, okay, I don't need to feel so bad about myself. You know, it's the lack of transparency that I think is the problem. And usually, you know, when you look at someone and they have makeup on, you can tell that they're wearing it. So it's not like you don't come away and be like, I don't look like her. It's like, oh, well, I just don't, she has makeup on, I don't, you know? So I think there's like some balance to be struck. And maybe that balance is like, just where people are more, that was one of the reasons I wanted to make a video about it as well, was just like get people talking about it, get people more aware of the thing. And that by doing that will diminish its like power. Same with this like wider concept of Moloch. If people understand that like so many of the ills of the world that we're seeing is because of like these coordination failures, and at least they like now can like, they don't just think it's just like, oh, everything's chaotic and humans are inherently evil. It's like, no, actually it's just like, bad competitive dynamics or bad system design has created this. And so we shouldn't like, now, you know, like with understanding comes a way of fixing something, basically.
Okay. That makes a ton of sense. I'm still curious, what made you, what was it just, what made you, was it just like this, like, you realized this issue and then you just switched, or was it?
Yeah. So, the reason why I decided to do this as opposed to like, for example, focus full-time on reg and so on. Well, I mean, you know, Igor and I both quit poker, so reg made no sense to sort of continue pursuing because we're not involved in poker anymore. And also like, you know, Dan Smith's double up drive is, you know, more than like carried on the mantle of effective altruism in poker. So, you know, that didn't make that much sense. So the question is like, why did I decide to start making videos on stuff? Well, partly because I'm still figuring out what the most impactful thing is I could do, but it seems like I have a talent for making these videos. And I think I'm fairly uniquely positioned to talk about the role of competition in society. Having been like a pathologically competitive person for much of my life and like played a lot of games, like, you know, I've seen both the good side and bad side of competition very much in like both myself and other people, the good side and bad side of games. And it's a very misunderstood concept. It's a very undeveloped topic, basically. There's not many scientific papers on the role of competition in society. I think it's a very understudied area and it's a very important area. So I wanted to use my platform and my, like, I guess, storytelling skill set, if I have one, to do this. And then on top of that, I wanted to learn how to make a short film. That was the other thing. Like everything you see in that video, I did myself, from the filming, from the editing, to the color grading, to the graphics, like you name it. Everything in there was done by me, because I kind of wanted to like learn the process of making a video and like how to make art and how to like make an educational piece as well at the same time. So it was just a combination of things, really. It was like I did it during lockdown, or like last year. I wanted to like understand what it takes to explain a kind of esoteric complex concepts to people, and also make it artistic and entertaining. And I think I did a good job. I'm certainly very proud of the piece. But the concept of Moloch and unhealthy competition is much, much bigger. This is just like a little example case study of it, to like suck people in who would never ever think of game theory. You know, I wanted to aim it at a largely female audience because most of my fans actually are male. Like if I look at my, you know, statistics, it's like 85% male, maybe even more, which makes sense because I'm known for poker. But at the same time, like we need everyone to understand. If we want to solve stand a chance of solving coordination problems, we need the whole world to understand what a coordination problem is, and that means I need to appeal to more female people, you know, or a younger audience as well. So that was kind of my goal with it. But I can't say there was like a strict strategic decision. I was like, oh, this is the best thing I can do. It was just like, I felt that I have this story in me. And it's a topic that I'm just like, I've been thinking about a lot. And like seeing the world, seeing the, like how the average dialogue on Twitter and so on has become so combative and confrontational. It's like, I want to understand why that is, what is happening. And it all boils down to game theory. everything's game theory.
So firstly, I want to say this sounds like a really interesting niche for you, and I thought I found it to be entertaining, and I mean, understanding this, it makes perfect sense, and it shows like this mass scale game theory problem that, I mean, personally, I think is like interesting to solve. I don't know how to solve it exactly. I wrote down topics that I felt compelling to me, and over time, this happened over years. That just topics that made me emotionally feel something firstly, and topics that or ideas that I thought would be interesting that that it seemed like people didn't necessarily talk about, or that transcended many different areas of many different subsectors of interest. Well, I'll give a really simple example. I was interested in conflict and change, and like what's the difference between a crazy person who's just outright crazy and a crazy person who believes they can do anything. Like how, like just topics like this. And for a while, it was just topics that I thought didn't make sense, or not, excuse me, didn't really like fit together in an obvious way. And then one day I had a couple of revelations, like just these thoughts that clicked in my head. And then a large portion of those thoughts sort of came together, and then I saw like an overarching theme of them shortly after this moment where I had these like thoughts that clicked in my head and put me into an altered state of consciousness as I found out what it was. It was like a feeling something like ecstasy for 4 days. People will probably think I'm lying. I didn't take any drugs or anything. Well, I did, in this like bizarre state, have this like idea of like something else I want to do with my life, which is related actually to the theme of what you're saying, is that basically well, this is kind of what this is like a long shot of why I made this podcast, is really how do we solve the game of life? Right. And that's kind of, I mean, in more colloquial terms, you could say what I ultimately realized was like an extension of many of the principles I learned in poker would lead to, if I just applied, you could say, like the goodness of my heart to it and building for a better future. But basically, I had a rough idea of what I want to do with my life ever since that moment. And all of a sudden, many of the thoughts I'd written down all kind of coalesced, just kept making sense in all these different ways. And I was obnoxiously deep at the poker tables, and people probably remember me asking all these weird questions. Like,
when was this?
This was in 2000, and must have been 3 years ago. This was in 2000, and what's 3 years ago? It was right before, it was the year before COVID.
2018, 2019. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just understand it correctly. It sounds like you had some like light bulb moment where you felt like everything made sense.
Yes.
And it made you were like making mental connections that you never made before.
I remember a couple of funny things that happened. It was kind of a weird series of events. There was like a moment that I felt a little bit not human, in that I was like in a strip club, and then I was like I was on this peace path of like, I want to make peace and be a great person. And then apparently I'd introduced a friend of mine to another friend of mine, and one of the friends had screwed each other over, and then he had gotten drunk in the strip club. We were at the Rhino, and he was like vomiting, and I remember him vomiting on my hand, and I felt no disgust, and I was just like cleaning up this guy's vomit on the floor.
It's like you had a spiritual awakening in the cement Rhino at 4 a.m. with your friend's vomit on your hand. Like,
well, it happened a few days before.
If that's a caption, it's beautiful. No, I can very much identify with this. I've not had something like this where, you know, it lasted 4 days or anything, but I've seen friends basically, like, people call this, you can call it a manic episode, you can call it a spiritual awakening, you can call it like a a sort of a prolonged psychedelic experience, whatever it is, there's sort of like correlations with them, where usually it's like a sort of feeling of euphoria, of like improved insight and deep like universal love. And whether it's drugs or I
feel like I felt that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, people feel this through psychedelic experiences, obviously, quite often. I think it's one of the reasons people do psychedelics, is because it gives you this altered state of consciousness, which, whether you want to explain it through like conventional psychology means is like, it's a period of heightened brain activity where different regions of the brain are more lit up and connected to each other, and thus people have, greater insights and so on, but it can lead to like greater delusion. You can explain it in scientific ways like that, or you can explain it in the like you're actually tapping into. It feels like when you're in that, it feels like you're tapping into a truly higher source of inspiration.
Definitely felt like that.
It's like there's this big field of knowing beyond our realms of current perception, and it's somehow, for whatever reason, you're tapped into it, and you're getting. It feels like divine insight almost. And
it
people
did feel like that, yes.
Yeah, right. And people can access that through drugs. Some people say they can access it through meditation. Some people, I think, have accessed it by accident or because they have a predisposition to having sort of, and this is where it like gets tricky, because again, like if you ask a conventional psychologist, they'll probably say, oh yes, they were having a manic episode, and if it goes on too long, it can lead to psychosis. And it's like, I've known people who've had this, and I've seen it go badly. But I know a lot of people who've had this where it doesn't go badly, and they just have like a sort of 3 or 4 day period of like deep insight, and like they're kind of a little crazy and manic, but they're also kind of fun to be around. There's a lot of the things they say don't make any sense. A lot of the things are like the most inspired thing you've ever heard. They typically don't sleep much, and then they'll crash out and for a little while, sort of come down to earth. I've never personally experienced one, but I mean, I might have through psychedelics. I might or might not have temporarily sort of felt this too. So I think there's a lot of value in these states, but like all things, they have to be handled with some degree of caution, because like it can, I've seen people go to psychosis because of extended periods of like not sleeping and being tapped into whatever they're tapped into. But yeah, basically you can explain it through a sort of conventional scientific means, or you can explain it through the lens of like, no, there really is something else out there that we can tap into, whether it's a unified field of consciousness, or whether it's God, or whether it's like some other form of magic. It feels like magic because it's very unpredictable and hard to explain.
Well, there would have to be science to it. And right. Speaking of, I feel like there needs to be some kind of term for people who are like, that believe in science, which seems like an oxymoron sort of, but are also like curious about all this spiritual magic stuff, because I feel like I'm slowly getting converted to the magic stuff lately. I have like periods of where I go back and forth, because I keep hearing these crazy stories, and I feel like there's just no way that everyone's lying to me. But I feel like there's scientific explanation somewhere, and like now I'm hearing that basically all psychics there's real psychics out there, and like crystals work, and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I've been experiencing a similar thing where I've just like had a bunch of things happen that I can't explain. One I'm happy to share here is like, because we talked about this once, is that before I won the European Poker Tour in San Remo, as I sat down on day one of it, I remember PokerStars like started playing like their intro thing for everyone. It was before I was there like before hand one, so eager, because it was like I think my first ever EPT. And they turned the lights down in the room before the shuffle up and deal, and played music like to pump everyone up. And while that was happening, I got this like sudden like rush of like goosebumps down my body, and a voice in my head that said, "You're going to win this tournament." But it sounded like my own voice, and I was like, "What?" Oh, weird. And it was so notable. Like I remember like looking around the room being like, did anyone else hear that? And then I won the tournament. And to this day, I've never been able to explain that. And that's the like a data point that has made me think maybe there's like some other realm of like understanding, or there's just something else going on outside of the conventional like linear day to day, like, you know, it's impossible to, you know, you can't understand anything back in time, you know, like there's no time travel, or there's no like greater knowing, there's no great, you know, it like made me just sit up and be like, okay, there's maybe something else going on here that I don't know. And I've never been able to explain it. Now, again, like the rational, you know, the conventional explanation is maybe I always have that feeling before every tournament, and I only remember the time where it came true. That's possible. I can't say that's definitely not the case, but I remember like looking out for that feeling afterwards in other tournaments. Like, and even when I won other tournaments, for example, I didn't win many other than the EPT, but like if I won a big thing online and so on, I was like, did I have that feeling beforehand? I was like, no, I didn't. It did feel extremely unique. So that's an example of something that I cannot explain.
That was like the first big tournament you won, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like anything.
It's kind of conspicuous.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting. It felt like, you know, we all have, you know, there's always this bias we have in us, or this, like, everyone wants to be like imagining they're at the center of some big grand universal story that's unfolding. And like, I want to, you know, I think it's important to not get too swept up in something like that. But like, if that was, you know, it's like very solipsistic view, right? But it really did feel very poignant, this moment in my life. And like, and I still haven't been able to explain it. You know, that I had this premonition basically. And then like, it took me a little while, but in the past few years, I've become a bit more open-minded. I still like ultimately, I just kind of like brushed it off for a while and was just like, no, like there is no ability. There are like, all psychics are bullshit. There is no such thing as magic, or like any of these like things that like aren't already, you know, that's outside of our understanding of physics and science right now. Like that is what it is. I was excessively closed-minded to this stuff, and I'm much more open-minded than I used to be. But it's still like, it's very easy then once you open the door to believing in any of these things, you have to be careful not to completely fall down the hill and believe in everything.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, but that's why you get the logic. You get the logic handrails where it's like you're sliding down, like maybe there's something down there. Maybe there's like a pot of gold or something.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Like handrails is a good way of describing it. And like, and
like but maybe it's a pit of fucking nothing.
Exactly. Maybe it's just like whatever you want to believe is true, because like it's all just like everything, like all of conscious experience is just made up, and like we're all just like, yeah, that's the thing. Like you could like go into this like kind of anarchy of like belief system, where it's just like anything is true. This person believes in crystals is real, so therefore crystals are real. Like this person believes that like UFOs are everywhere. Fine, fuck it, they are. You know, like reality is just made by consciousness, and then if enough people believe in it, then it becomes true. That's not that implausible, honestly, at this point. Like no one really knows what the fuck's going on. Anyone who's like, no, it's just like the Big Bang happened and the universe will continue like this. It's like, but why? You know, like if people are just satiated with that explanation of what all this is, then that's an excessive amount of closed-mindedness. Like they're like, it's not like, that's why I went from being like an atheist of like, no, there's clearly no God, to being like, well, actually there could quite easily be a God. Like it seems also like kind of insane that the universe just like emerged out of nothing for no reason. Like that seems just as implausible as something that's saying like, actually it was created for a reason, and there is therefore some kind of creator. Like I you know, it's to me, like at this point, like life is just like, I'm like traversing an ever narrowing ridge of like between like a pit of like skepticism and a pit of gullibility. And it's like, how do I like not fall down into like believing everything, but also not fall down into being like, okay, well, like nothing, you know, I'm this is reality, and I'm going to be overly believing in that. And it's hard and it's exhausting, but it's like, I think what the mystery, like, it's the most interesting part of life right now is like, I now like, and I hear someone who said like, oh yeah, my blah, blah, blah is psychic, they can talk to the dead. Whereas before I'd be like, yeah, and not even give it a second thought. I'm like, tell me what happened. I want to hear people's experiences, but we need to be careful, I think, when we hear this stuff, to not like like, I don't know, you just have to, you need some kind of guardrails, and I don't know what they are. Yeah.
Logic, reason,
right. Well, probability, like, I mean, Bayesianism, math, you know, you're well, no, like it's
less of you. Math has a mind.
Well, I mean, it's just like, again, like a game of poker, because like poker, we just assign probabilities to everything, right? We go, someone like, we're in a huge pot and someone check raises the turn, like, you know, 2x pot. We're like, okay, well, a percentage of the time they're bluffing, you know, with this portion of the range, and another percentage of the time they actually have it. And so we become comfortable with assigning probabilities to that. Well, I just copy paste that framework now into, like, when I meet someone who I find credible because I know they're logical and reasonable, and then they tell me something that, like, is like somewhat unexplainable through any, you know, that like rattles my worldview. I like hear the story and I now give it just a prior probability. You know, I'm like, what's my prior? Okay, well, this is evidence. What is the, you know, what strength do I give that evidence? And then I'll either update it accordingly or not. And that's, you know, that's all we can do. But it's like actually trying to give things a probability. Like, okay, and I only give you a 1 in 10,000 chance of this being accurate, or a 1 in 4 or whatever.
Kind of doing something like that too. It's more like, right, some things I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I could tell my psychic experience a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. Go on.
I talked to 2 psychics, to be precise, and the first one said something about meeting a special girl. And the first time I talked to that psychic, it seemed like they totally understood me, but the later times it didn't really seem like it. And I will say that it did seem to meet a special girl afterwards, who proceeded to drive me completely insane. At the point at which, I won't reveal all the details right now. It's, in my opinion, it's a crazy as shit story that involves all sorts of scandalous things. But at some point, I got the whole panel on board because I didn't know what the hell was going on with her, and I had like experts talking to like thousands of women with mental problems and dating them and all sorts of things. I'm just going insane and whatever. At one point, I got a psychic. And then I told this psychic just her name. That's it. I didn't tell her anything else. And then she proceeded to tell me perfectly exactly as I felt and as I was dealing with things and what I thought the solution was. And it was not just one thing, and it wasn't slowly or anything like that. It was just like, it was for 15 minutes or so, or like 10 minutes or so of just really fast talking, and every single thing they said seemed to line up. And there's like maybe 5% that I wasn't really sure about. And everything else just seemed like it made total and complete sense. And I'm like, what the fuck? So apparently the psychic says different things for different people. And now I'm like, you know what, maybe next time I have a girl problem, I'm going to come to the psychic and see what she says.
Okay, so I guess to try and, like, you know, let's put our skeptic hat on and attack this. So my first question is when she was saying, like, when she, with her like dialogue that she was giving you, her spiel, would she pause to see how you reacted?
No pause.
No pause, because like one thing I could imagine that she, you know, like, because I think some people are just very good at, you know, intuiting how someone's feeling.
Maybe
you know,
that
like
you
speak of women's intuition. Like women, I think, you know, it's not just women, like, you know, people in general, but some people are just better at, like, I can just, like, if you know someone well, or, you know, like you've seen enough people, you can sense, like, okay, this person's miserable right now. This person's clearly unhappy. They've got pain and so on. Where, you know, so like maybe she inferred that you know, you're unhappy. You've clearly got some relationship issues. You mention then you mention a girl's name. And so she can now infer from that, okay, this guy's clearly got some kind of heartache going on over this girl. Yeah. So from that, she can start saying, you know, I would imagine, like, if I was to like charlatan my way through this, I'd be like, you know, let's say her name's, you say Lisa. I'm like, Lisa. Let me get, so Lisa's, she's very beautiful. She's a very sexy woman, very charismatic. Say anything like, no, okay. But you can see where I'm going, right? Like I could see a path where someone could say a bunch of things, like she can infer from like the little bit of information given that, like, you are. I may have said something
like that does make sense. Like I may have said something like that in that tone, and then she would go on and on.
Exactly. So then that gives her like a path to like go on and, like, you know, go down that pathway a bit heavier, and that would like, and of course, because when someone goes to a psychic, we're generally like, we're very vulnerable to confirmation bias, right? We're already open-minded enough to go to something like this. So it means we're more likely to therefore like look for reasons why our crazy decision to go see a psychic, you know, was good. And so we'll be like, oh yes, that was right. So you're going to latch on the confirming evidence and probably not go into the But
there wasn't like anything she said that was like definitely not true. Let's put it that way. There's only like 5% maybe not true.
Okay, but that's interesting that she just like there was basically no breaks, and she didn't seem to be like responding to your things to then like know which direction to go. So then my next question is like, how general were the things she said?
Not general at all. It was like,
so can you give an example of how she was specific?
So she said, I mean, I guess you could say something like on further spectrum, there's some things that are a little bit general, but she was saying things like you're ready to just say, okay, what's the problem? If there's a problem, we'll fix it. And that's like 100% me. And then and they're saying like, this person like basically had some kind of deficit of within where they couldn't like accept like basically an abundance of something. And it looks as though at like one moment like everything's fun, and all of a sudden like I've seen some angry faces, and then there's all kinds of trouble, which is kind of exactly what happened. And then they said let's see, what else did they say?
Like, did she say any event? Like, she was like, oh, you guys, when you were in France together, you had a very big argument or something like that. Did she say anything where it was like absolutely matched up with an item of history in your relationship, where like with a location?
No, it wasn't that specific. It could be all bullshit. It could be, but it was very good bullshit itself.
Just because my observation of relationships now, I've been through some great relationships, I've been through some very bad ones. Like, there's usually a pattern that's quite and I spend a lot of time like coaching friends through difficult relationships, and like it's remarkable how often like the same problems arise. Usually there's some kind of power dynamic where one is more confident in the relationship than the other.
Well, there has to be. That seems.
Yeah, most of the time, like there's always some kind of power imbalance. Usually, typically a sign of like, of all the best relationships I've known and seen, of like ones where I'm like, these two are going to last, it's because like the power balance is like very complementary in some way. But anyway, so like my point is that like there's a surprising like few, you can compress all the different ranges of relationships down into a surprisingly small number of buckets, where you can like predict what that's like for each party and like the feelings they've experienced. There's an incredible book that I read called The Passion Trap, which I recommend you and everyone watching this to go watch, to go read.
Watch it.
It's a book to go read if you want to understand like relationships and power dynamics and that kind of thing. And it's like reading a personal diary, which is why that's the one reason why I'm like slightly skeptical of this psychic. If like she gave like, even though they were very fitting to you and how you're feeling emotionally, but general descriptions of your feelings, is because like when I read this book, I was going through a difficult relationship at the time, and it was like reading a personal diary. I was like, can this author read my mind? That I remember feeling that.
Yeah,
and that's because like actually relationships are really predictable. Human beings are surprisingly predictable when it comes to like affairs of the heart. So that's why I guess I would come away like, I think I wouldn't say that this psychic is necessarily, and obviously I don't want to diminish your experience at all, but I wouldn't say it's a particularly strong data point for that there's like a bigger source of inspiration, or that she's like literally tapped into, like she's able to read your mind as such, as that like she's a really good intuitor. She's probably like a natural psychologist, and she just understands how people feel in relationships really well.
Well, that's why I want to test it more. Maybe, I mean, it's possible, but she's also like, at least to a friend. Well, my best theory is like someone like basically told her a bunch of information beforehand. I mean, this is possible. And then like basically someone else was in on it. This is my personal possible theory.
How did you meet this psychic? Did someone send you to her, or?
Yeah, someone sent me to her.
Was she expensive?
No, not really. She was like over a week in advance. Maybe it's all, yeah, it could totally be all nonsense. Like I could definitely see
I mean, it can be, or it can be like the more nuanced thing, which is that actually I don't know, I'm trying to think of some stories I've heard where like people, actually funny enough, someone I was speaking to the other day was telling me about her son, who when he was 4 years old would like, would like turn to her, and she's like, he was like, Mum, you know, I'm totally fine with you. If you want to date, you know, I know you're not with Dad anymore. You should date other people, but let me have insight. Like, don't keep anything from me. And she was like, what? This is a very emotionally mature thing to come out of a 4-year-old. And then at like 6 years old or 10 years old, she would show him a picture of someone and he would be able to infer and say so much stuff about this, but like freakish amounts of things about this person's life. And I take this person who told me the story pretty seriously, because you know, I don't think they're embellishing much. Let's put it that way. And so like that would be like a slight, you know, so that might be an example of someone who does seem to have some like bizarre amount of like ability to read, you know, like maybe they can just see, you know, like extrapolate information from a very small amount of information, right? Because that's like kind of what you're saying a psychic is. It's like they will get a very small amount of information, like they see your face on a photograph or in person, and then they can just extrapolate out from there and like see your life's history or people who you've been friends with or lost or whatever. You know, that's like a sort of a more I guess almost like a computational science way of looking at it.
Well, the thing is, the psychic has like, I don't know what information the other person is given. I want to keep testing just to make sure, but apparently psychics right 100% of the time and doesn't say the same thing like at all. And if it matters at all, I tried twice and she basically said the same thing. That's something very similar the second time.
Oh, well, yeah, that's.
But I don't know if she knew it was me, you know?
Right. Well, you mean you're Googleable. You're famous.
Well, yeah, but I didn't sign up that way. Or maybe I did. I don't know, actually. Maybe
that's what I'm saying. Like,
I think a big charade.
You need to devise, and I think we should like just. I think this is the thing that annoys me about the sort of like the woo, you know, big believers in psychics community and like horoscopes and this kind of stuff. Is they're like, no, you can't prove that it's not real. I was like, well, yeah, but you're making an extraordinary claim by saying that you can like infer that someone's personality from the way that the stars moved or whatever. It's like, you know, the burden of proof is on you to you need to give so much evidence to show that this very extraordinary claim is true. And they don't go out and run like controlled trials on this, you know, like go do the science, like go hire some data scientists, go out and actually like use the scientific method to find out if this, you know, because if it turns out that you can predict, let's say, some, you know, what someone's life is going to be like over the next year, be based on their star sign, well, that would be an incredibly powerful tool for humanity. It'd be very useful. You know, like, don't you think, like, go out and actually, like, you know, make this happen, you know, build a business out of it, you know, but the point is, like, don't just like tell people, oh no, you can, and like make them believe in something. I mean, there might be some instrumental value in, like, let's say horoscopes, if it truly makes people who feel, again, like desperate and out of control in their lives, makes them feel some kind of agency and like safety, sure, fine. But again, like these things can become unhealthy if they're then like not actually thinking about the world in a critical, like reasonable way, like, or accurate way. There's only there's some amount of inaccuracy that might be helpful, but beyond a certain point, you know, if you just go around having like patently false beliefs about the world, you're just not going to do very well. You're not going to be able to make, you know, make your life turn out how you want it to, because you're just not making good predictions. For sure. So like, if you know, like my sort of call to action to the like, let's say the horoscope community is like, okay, go, you think that your date of birth determines your personality, go and like, you know, set up a personality testing website, get like 1 million people to take it and make them input their date of birth, and then go and get a data scientist to look at it and see if there's any like strong correlates between like people born in January have this type of personality, you know, because there are actually good, like there's like the Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and all these different things, which are actually pretty like they're not perfect, but you can, like, you do notice that there are like a fixed number of different types of personalities that people typically fall into. So see if that lines up to dates of birth. Why hasn't anyone done this study? You know, like, I think that would be, if you want people to believe in horoscopes, then go do a study that is like, you know, publish a scientific paper where people can scrutinize your method and look at your results and agree or not, you know, like, and find out, you know, with more, you know, some certainty whether or not this is true. Until you do that, I'm sorry, like, you can't go expecting, you know, can't go being upset when people don't believe in horoscopes, because you're just making an extraordinary claim without really any evidence to back it up.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm pretty much on board, although I want to.
And again, the same with psychics.
Like, yeah, no, I think so too. This needs to be tested more. You've actually put like,
they're not real.
You could shatter my beliefs. I don't give a shit. Maybe in front of everyone, whatever. It wasn't good news anyway, by the way. It wasn't really good news.
Did it make you? Huh? Oh, it was horrible news. Like, did it make you?
No, it wasn't horrible news. It was basically, it was about what I thought. And I was just letting it fuck with me a lot more than it should. What were you saying?
That's helpful. That's great. Like, if that's the thing, like I'm all for, if like you came away from that psychic interaction with a greater clarity about what you should do to make your life better, fucking great. Like, that's an example again of one of these like helpful, like useful fictions.
Well, it just made me wonder more, to be honest. It's hard to like take the psychic's word for like 100%. I mean, I was sitting here thinking, wow, I still don't believe her. But you know, maybe it's true. Let's see what she says about other stuff.
Yeah. I guess you just like perhaps before you go in to see her next time, like have a bunch of, you know, benchmarks. If she manages to hit like something of this level of accuracy, well, now it's going to update you to like 90% confidence in her, or, you know, like you can divide, like have a defined set of benchmarks that you want her to hit. Because let's say she's a perfect 100% psychic, you know, you could go in there with something in your head. Like, yesterday I went for coffee and nearly ran over a cat, and visualize black cat, or something like, you know, something that you want to try and, you would assume that if you had it in your head, the psychic would be able to pick up, and go in there and test it, you know? And so if she doesn't pass that benchmark, you know that your confidence can't be above this level, and so on and so forth. Have have a bunch of like benchmarks that you see if she can hit. You know, that's one way to test it, I guess.
Clearly education of some kind for kids is quite a big area of impact. And I personally wanted to ask you what your thoughts on using gaming and potentially poker would be for that area. Yeah,
so I think so I guess a way to like answer this question is like, do I think it would be a net positive or negative? Let's say if
you could put it net positive,
like if for like that, for example, into the like national curriculum in K-12 schools, that there was a weekly lesson in some kind of like toy game of poker for kids, where they play, and then they talk about what their thought process was and how they thought through the problem and so on. You know, not saying like they should actually like betting money or anything like that. If there was a way to like design it so that it's like not considered gambling per se, but it's like teaching them, you know, the betting on things and like evaluating whether someone's telling the truth or not, or like, you know, what you want to happen, you know, like learning like sunk cost fallacy and this kind of thing. If there was like a weekly K-12 class that all kids had to do on that was designed well and taught well, do I think it's a positive or negative for like, say, the outcomes of America in 20 years? I would say yes, provided that it's designed really, really well and, you know, it's taught well. And that would be the problem, is that like, how do you teach teachers to teach something like that who aren't poker players themselves? It's gonna be tricky. But if that could be done, I think it would be an incredible thing for a country like America or whatever, because it's just so, it's teaching rationality. But you know, there's many different paths to like making better decisions. You know, some people get there through a career in science and understanding the scientific method. Some people get there through like trial and error, like being a business person and like, you know, failing multiple times and learning that way, and like understanding like biases, you know, confirmation bias, sunk cost fallacy, all these different things. Poker is another path to it. Poker might be the most, like, in my opinion, like the funnest path to it. Readinglesswrong.com is another path to it. You know, so the point is like, anything that teaches kids about decision making and like betting on beliefs, thinking in probabilities, understanding the role of intuition versus logic in decision making, understanding the like how like the importance of sample sizes, and like the role luck can play, and in like in terms of like noisy, you know, looking for signal in the noise and that kind of thing. Anything that teaches these to children would be better than the current situation, because we are not, like, at least my experience of like, and I went to a good school in the UK, very good school, but ultimately I was like taught, like, I didn't really understand what the scientific method was. And I was like really good at science. You know, it wasn't until I went to university and like read it myself, I was like, oh, this is actually what science is about. It's not about like this, you know, calculating, doing math and you know, understanding, you know, knowing that this equals that and so on. No, it's a line of inquiry. It's about like designing experiments to find out, you know, testing hypotheses. And like, that's what science is at its core. It's a method of inquiry. And we're not really explaining that properly to children, where they actually come away really understanding what it is. You know, when you, hey kid, when you go out and like poke a bee's nest with a stick to see what happens, you're doing science. It's not perhaps the best designed experiment, but that's science, kids, you know, like, and it's taught all wrong. And similarly, like, you know, when you're testing a hypothesis, you know, if you really want that hypothesis to be true, then you're going to have some bias to look for all the confirming evidence and ignore the disconfirming evidence. Like that wasn't taught. I didn't understand that until I started doing poker. Expected value. How the fuck that isn't taught in like K-12 school is insane, because it's one of the most important concepts for decision making, and it's super simple. It's really a very simple formula. I didn't learn that until, again, I got into poker, you know, or like, you know, I got interested in investing, but I was like, I had to teach myself that at like age 24 or whatever. Like, it's insane that these things aren't taught in high school, because they're so powerful. You know, they're so useful for like actual life. So yes, I think poker is a great vehicle for that. And you know, if I found out there was a school that was teaching it and I have kids, I would choose that school over, you know, provided they're teaching it well, which I think they probably are. They'd be teaching it better than anyone else. I would send my kids there in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Okay. I have the feeling that it's useful also, but I personally just don't know how to prove it. And if like for sure, it seems like it for sure has some kind of effect, but it's really kind of nebulous, especially how to.
I mean, a way you could do it is like, why don't you, you know, you're better equipped than anyone to like try and teach poker. Like, think about a way, how would you explain a game of poker to a 7-year-old? How would you explain it to a 12-year-old? But then how would you also like design it in a way where it like minimizes the chances where they go away thinking that they should be gambling for stuff all the time, you know, like that's like that's
away all the negatives.
Right, exactly. And by the way, I think a big part of the negative is more just like parental perception. I wouldn't be mad if I found out like if my kid got sent home from school because they were actually like playing poker with their friends, like betting sweets or something, and they're like, oh, they were gambling. I'd be honestly like kind of proud of my kid. Like, good for you, like entrepreneurial spirit. As long as like I explain to them, like, you know, you teach them like, well, look, sometimes, you know, if you end up betting for too many sweets or too much of, you know, your pocket money, that's going to hurt your friend for this reason, you know, like teach them that lessons of like not doing harm onto their opponents and being gracious in winning or gracious in defeat. Then, you know, I'd be happy for my kid to be doing that, honestly.
I would say poker is one way to balance the playing a less than zero-sum game in the context of a greater than zero-sum game.
Yes, that's a very, very nice way of putting it.
Which seems to apply to life, because capitalism has to exist and all this other stuff, like sexual capitalism. Is that a thing? I guess that's a thing.
Sure.
All these other kinds of fun and stressful ideas. I personally view that to be an area of strong focus for a lot of reasons. And I know that you made a video on it yourself, or at least on the idea of poker as education. So I was curious what you think.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or anything that you'd like to promote, or?
Not specifically. I mean, I would love for people who haven't seen it to go and check out my last video, this one on the beauty wars and Moloch.
Happy to promote that.
I mean, I particularly would love poker players' feedback on it. Or the people likely to be watching this, just because they get game theory and they also probably like tried to explain it to normies a lot, and so that's what I'm obviously trying to do. And I feel like, you know, so poker players would have good insight on how to do it, you know, because I'm sort of slowly working on the next installment of the series, the follow-up video on this topic. So yeah, if I would promote anything, then it's that. I guess the other thing is I'm starting a podcast soon with a friend, my friend Grimes.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I don't know if there's any point in me promoting it right now because it's not out yet, but it'll be coming out hopefully in a few months, once we've recorded enough episodes. And otherwise, yeah, actually, if I was anywhere, I would direct people to go read. Go read the Meditations on Moloch blog, because it's something I think poker players will love. It's one of the best pieces of writing I've ever read, and it explains how game theory is like how competitive dynamics are can make the bad things in society, and we need more people thinking about how to fix this. And poker players are a great pool of very smart minds. So maybe if you can include it in the show notes, the link to that blog, that would be awesome.
Sure.
I didn't write it.
Okay, these ones I'll remember, but I'm happy to. I like both of them actually. I could say that I love both of them. In fact, I thought it took me into the Meditations of Moloch. I didn't understand the poem in the beginning, but it seems to tie into things that I personally found validity to, and yeah, it articulately describes all these dynamics of what's going on in the world and the things that have been changing in various directions and all of that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and I thought your video was very well done, especially for that's your first production.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first video I've made, but it was the most like intense one I've done, let's put it that way. So yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Yes, thanks for your time, Liv. Really, you've been a great participant in the show and had a lot of amazing thoughts. And yeah, it's been a long podcast, but yeah, appreciate the effort and your insights onto this Moloch subject and effective altruism and all of that. And
yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk.
All right, well, see you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Winning the Game of Life. Tune in next week for another great episode. Of course, hit subscribe and follow Dan on Instagram @TheDanCates.